again, sizing up Murphy, drives, floats, hangs, and scores on the turnaround. J Dub way behind the three-point line and hits way behind the three-point line. Got blocked, what a rejection by Holmgren. Standing tall like a wall.
This is Dart. You're listening to the Uncontested.
What is up, Thunder fans, and welcome to the Uncontested Podcast, post-game podcast edition, as the Thunder just won 104-99 to defeat the Hawks in their final preseason game of the preseason. They end up finishing the preseason 4-1, which is great to see. A lot to break down. Excited to get into it. But before we get any further, we are a proud part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network and brought to you now by our good friends and partners over at Prairie L's. Excited to dive into some of those things. Like I mentioned, speaking of Prairie L's, a lot of exciting things to be coming up for the Uncontested. Also, I'm looking at the comments. Appreciate all of you already in the contents or in the comments and the content you all are providing me. Yes, it's very disappointing that Jacob is not on this podcast because Jacob Niffin's hair in the chat has done the Doug Dimmadome hat, the gallon cowboy hat, like we talked about on last night's podcast, Sunday night. Very good stuff. Jacob Niffin's hair. You might have to keep that for Wednesday's podcast so Jacob can see it. I appreciate all of you in the chat. Speaking of which, continue to drop your comments and your questions. I'll be sure to try and address those here at the end of the post-game podcast. I also forgot to mention, you can find us on all social media sites, Twitter, X, whatever, Facebook, Instagram. We're promoting a lot of our like watch party things and some of our images and graphics that Justin's creating on Instagram. Be sure to follow us there. And obviously YouTube, it's been a big platform for us over the past year or so. We're really excited to grow that even further this season. That's we're getting closer and closer, 1 week exactly to the date away from the Thunder's first regular season game. So be sure to follow us there as well. Like I mentioned, before we dive into this game, some exciting programming notes for the Uncontested. You guys may be tired of us hearing or mentioning these over and over, but we're really excited about them. I hope you all will show out for these. This Sunday night, it is the Uncontested annual bets podcast. I'm not sure which year this is. I think this is year 4 or 5 of doing this. Pretty awesome. One of our biggest podcasts that we do each year, and just honestly the most fun way to preview the upcoming season, both Thunder and for the NBA league-wide as a whole. You'll see us pay off some of the remaining bets we have left from last season on this podcast on Sunday, and we're excited to dive into some new ones for the upcoming season. And it's always fun when you all follow along and mention those bets throughout the season, so be sure to tune in for that. Then Monday night, really exciting news as well. Myself, Jacob, Silva, we've all been invited by the Thunder to podcast live from the Paycom Center floor, like Jacob and Silva did last season during the Thunder's game night preview and culinary experience event. So we are going to get fed and get to see some of the cool and preview some of the really cool different foods and offerings that Thunder will have for the game day experience at the Paycom this season. And then obviously get to podcast from the floor and kind of dive into and preview a little bit the regular season ahead. So we're really excited about that. Super thankful for Thunder for inviting us back out for year 2. But it doesn't end there. Thursday, first game of the season. Obviously, we will have you all covered against the Denver Nuggets a week from tonight when we do our post-game podcast. And then Saturday, speaking of Prairie L's, first watch party of the season back at Prairie. We're excited to do it again, especially now that they're a official sponsor of ours. We're going to have beer. Lots of beer, lots of barbecue, great barbecue food truck that's going to be out there. We're super excited for that. Obviously, Thunder basketball playing against Josh Giddey and the Chicago Bulls. And we're going to have some giveaways. Be sure to stick around and you can enter and for some giveaways. We're going to have some gift cards, some merch, some fun things like that. Sunday, Thunder home opener against the Hawks. A couple of us will be there in person. Be sure to hit us up and we can give you some stickers, and we'll have our post-game group podcast a week from this Sunday. And then one last programming note, just a little teaser, but a big announcement coming from us soon on additional ways we will be covering the team this season and engaging and interacting with our fans. We think this is going to be a really big step for us moving forward and are really excited to be able to engage with you all in a new setting and kind of make you all more a part of what we're doing here at the Uncontested. And we think this is a perfect time to do it, to announce it heading into a really fun season. So a lot of things, a lot of exciting things on deck for the Uncontested. However, again, before we even dive into this game, transitioning us to some less exciting things. It was announced this morning, after we had podcasted last night and talked so much about Isaiah Hartenstein, of course, that he has sustained a small non-displaced fracture in his left hand during the second half of Thursday's preseason game in Denver. Hartenstein will be reevaluated in 5 to 6 weeks, the Thunder say. So just a little additional context on that. We have all these Twitter doctors now, these sports doctors who come in and provide context. But this guy's pretty reputable. He has a good track record and also provides some really good context, I think. So I wanted to read this off from Jeff Stotts at In Street Clothes. Isaiah Hartenstein. Based on the description, it seems likely he fractured one of his metacarpals. Because it is non-displaced, he will likely avoid surgery. Sounds good news. But the average time lost for hand fractures that do not need surgery is 15.6 games, or about 35 days. And that's spot on with the time frame that the Thunder gave us. So obviously extremely disappointing news. iHeart was looking really good. I want to give a shout out to Nick and I's good friend Peyton, who provided the analogy this morning to us, that iHeart being hurt, we're grateful it's nothing worse, and we're obviously going to see him still early in the season, but it's like getting a Christmas present, he said, and not getting to play with it or have it until February. I thought that was the perfect analogy. We talked last night and all preseason really just about the space that iHeart creates for his teammates, especially guys like J Dub and Shai and others with his screening ability and his softball play. And also we saw a lot of this in the last preseason game where he's sealing off defenders at the top of the key after the dribble handoffs, which creates wide open opportunities for some of the three-point shooters. And we'll get into Dub and Shai's three-point shooting. So obviously not having that is very disappointing to start the season, and for them to kind of get their feet under them and kind of, figure each other out and build that chemistry. But like I mentioned with the time frame that was given, plus the additional context, we likely will see him back at the end of November, early December timeframe, which isn't the end of the world. Could be worse, but obviously disappointing. So what does this mean for the team and for the Thunder as a whole? Hopefully J Will can come back. He's been out with a hamstring issue all preseason. He's going to be reevaluated, the Thunder said, after the preseason, and the preseason's over. We have 1 week until the Thunder play their first regular season game. And J Will's been on the floor. We've seen him moving pretty well, and some of the clips we gotten from the Thunder beat writers. So hoping that maybe J Will's available. If not, hopefully he's available only after a couple of games. And that would give us a true backup center, which would be very nice. But tonight, we saw Cason Wallace starting in iHeart and Caruso's place. We've seen now when everybody's available, that's not injured. We've seen 3 main starting lineups from Daigneault so far. Here, what was it, a little over a week ago, we saw the main 4 starters with Caruso and Giddey's place, the smaller lineup. A couple days later, we saw the starting lineup with iHeart, the double big lineup, instead of and the starting place of what would have been Josh Giddey last season. And then tonight, Caruso was available, but we saw Cason Wallace getting that start. And I actually really liked that. It was fun. We actually saw Cason bring the ball up and get some on-ball reps. Something we talked a lot about during the offseason that we hope to see more of him this upcoming year, even with and that happened tonight, even with players like Shai and Dub playing. So I thought that was interesting. And then we'll get into the subs and the sub patterns that we saw tonight. But we might see some more small ball is my point. And then finally, more Usman Dieng. We'll get into Usman, kind of a tale of two halves from him tonight. We saw him play not incredibly great in the first half and play much, much better in the second half. So maybe we see some more him really getting an opportunity to play with some of these starters with iHeart out. Unfortunately, the injury news does not end there. Tonight, J Dub started. He played really, really well. But in the second quarter, driving to the rim, honestly, it kind of seemed like he got tangled up with his own feet and I think he finished the basket. I can't remember completely now, but he suffered a left ankle sprain in the second quarter of the game. He was in noticeable pain down on the floor for a while, was actually pounding his fist on the ground, which made me very concerned. Thankfully, he got up, was able to, put his weight on that ankle and make it back to the locker room on his own 2 feet. But unfortunately, he was out for the rest of the game with a left ankle sprain. And that is definitely something to keep an eye on. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up here live on the podcast. I got a text that Dub tweeted something out. Oh, no, he's just being funny and responding to, I think, friend of the podcast, Brandon Rabar. He's actually responding to the play where he sprained that ankle, and he said, damn, with a laughing face. So, hopefully that's maybe some positive news. He's making a bit of a joke out of it. Hopefully it's nothing too serious. We saw Dub last season do this a couple of times. Some of them looked much worse than this, and he came back much sooner than we anticipated. And kind of a fun little aside, we have a bit of a source-off with two of our friends in the Thunder media, Daniel Bell and Clemente Almanza, both friends of the podcast as well. They mentioned Dub being in street clothes on the bench towards the end of the game. But Daniel noticed a limp, and Clemente said there wasn't much of a limp. So we will see. I think Daignault said they will, at post-game, that they'll evaluate tomorrow and see what the swelling looks like and the severity of it. If I had to guess, we probably do not see Dub the first week of the season next week, but hopefully we see him the week after. Again, that is not sourced. That's just my personal opinion, knowing Dub, how he reacted last year to some of those ankle sprains, and then seeing the severity of this one. Knock on wood, but hopefully it's nothing too serious. But we maybe do not see him for for the season opener against Denver next Thursday, which is really disappointing, obviously, especially because I thought, and this is probably a good transition into the game tonight, but I thought Dub in that first half looked like the best player on the floor, even with Shai on the court, and Shai also looked really good. So, again, let's go ahead and Jacob Niffens-Harris says, if Taylor says it is all right, then it must be all right. Let's hope that's the case. I am hit or miss on my track record there. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the big themes, some of the big players that stood out from tonight's game. Let's just go ahead and start with the big three. Speaking of Dub and Shai, and including Chet, I tweeted this out, and we talked a lot about this during the preseason, but there seems to be an emphasis for the team as a whole when it comes to three-pointers and getting more three-point attempts up. But primarily, we've seen a lot of that from Shai and Dub, and that continued. Dub's shooting looks incredible. He had 2 early three-point shots in the first quarter that looked great. You had Shai doing the same. I'll go ahead and head over to the box score here. Dub only had 2 3-point. Never mind. He only had 2 3-point. I thought he made 2 3-pointers, but I guess the one I'm thinking of was the one on the right elbow, right wing, where he drilled it off the dribble. He was 5 of 6 from the floor, 1 of 2 from 3, 11 points, 3 assists. Again, he was just dominating, driving to the rim at will, creating separation. He had this absolutely dirty, 360 hook shot in transition where I believe Shai fed him the ball. He spins, does a little hook shot. It's incredible. Him and Shai are smiling ear to ear. They're having a ton of fun. And then shortly after, he sprains his ankle because, of course, and we can't have nice things. But like I said, I thought Dub was just dominant. Looked dominant yet again. He's looked great all preseason. And same can be said for Shai. Shai took a little more of a backseat tonight, trying to set up his teammates, which I thought was great. At the same time, I think he was kind of going through the motions tonight, especially on the defensive end of the floor, trying not to get injured, and I don't blame him one bit. He ended so Shai, Chet, and Dub, all of them, well, obviously Dub because he got hurt, but they all played the first half. We did not see him in the second half, thankfully. Shai had 6 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 of 4 from the floor, and 2 of 3 from 3. And so, again, nothing really fancy there in Shai's stat line, but the thing to mention about Shai's the three-point shooting, yet again. I think he had a catch-and-shoot 3 for his first three-point attempt. I can't exactly remember, but the second one stands out the most to me. He's sitting there in the corner, has a great defender, and Dyson Daniels on him. He draped all over him, really. Shai doesn't even put the ball on the floor, does a little jab step, goes ahead and puts up the three-point shot and just absolutely drills it. And that's horrifying. If you're, a fan of another team, or you're a GM or a scout from another team watching this Thunder's preseason, Shai and Dub both, especially Shai, his three-point shot looks so much more improved. He's obviously shooting them with confidence. And if that's the next evolution of Shai's game, and he's still able to get to the free throw line like we saw the past couple of seasons and obviously create his shot, which he's so elite at, we're talking about maybe the MVP in the league. And that is horrifying for opposing teams. And so that's really some of the biggest takeaways, in my opinion, from this preseason is the big three. How good Dub and Shai have looked, especially from 3, expanding their games. And the next player to get into is Chet Holmgren. Also only played the first half of the game, thankfully. 15 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 5 of 10 from the floor. And the big thing for me is the 5 of 8 from the free throw line. I think I tweeted this out from the account, but where Shai and Dub seem to have taken an initiative to work on the 3-point shooting and to put up more 3-point attempts in the preseason, we've kind of seen the opposite from Chet, but in a very good way. We're seeing a very aggressive Chet. Every first half he's played, because he hasn't finished a game, I don't believe, in the preseason for obvious reasons. He's been much more aggressive driving to the rim. He's finishing through contact. He's doing just a little bit of everything. But the biggest thing to me is something we talked a lot about when I remember here a couple of years ago talking about what is Shai's next step into, superstardom. What is going to get him there? And for us, we kept saying he's got to be able to get to the line. He's got to be able to create space and draw that contact and be able to finish at the free throw line. That's what we're seeing from Chet tonight. And I thought it was incredibly impressive. He's being hit as a roller. His teammates are finding him. He's moving really well off ball. He's cutting, making the right reads off ball, which is another huge development. And he's just basically driving through the lane with his dribble. He's tightened up the handles. And then, like I said, he's able to absorb that contact now, finish through the contact, and get to the free throw line. So if you have guys like Dub and Shai and Lou, you're throwing out Isaiah Joe, Caruso, they're hitting those outside shots. Obviously, Hartenstein, when he's back, is creating more space for those guys to be able to do so. And then you have Chet being able to work in the paint like that. I mean, this is a dangerous, dangerous team we're talking about. So I definitely wanted to dive into the big three because I thought they all had really good flashes, again, prior to Dub's ankle injury. I mentioned some lineups earlier. Kaysen started the first half. Caruso was the first sub for Chet, and they went small. So Caruso comes in for Chet, and basically you have J Dub at center. And that was really interesting to me. Maybe that's something we see a little more of with Hart being hurt. Obviously, Mark is not afraid to experiment, and I love that from him. And it just creates a lot of mismatches for the opposing teams. Yes, maybe they get out-rebounded a lot, again, like we saw last season, early here in the season until Hart's back. But the opportunities, and this is something that they don't touch on so much last year, it's like, yeah, we're giving up a lot of offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, but we have so many other advantages. We kind of think that outweighs the rebounding. And that's a lot of what we saw tonight, I think, with that smaller lineup. And I'm curious if we see more of it. Just the perimeter defense of those players all on the court. Literally every single one. You had Kaysen, Caruso, Shai, who's great at getting steals and one-on-one perimeter defense. Dub, who's even better in all those aspects. And then who was the last one I mentioned? I can't remember now. Regardless, that's a hellacious defense there, especially on the perimeter. Maybe you're giving up some size, but I think that could really play to the Thunder's advantage. And that's a lineup I would like to see a little more of while Hart is hurt. So hopefully J Dub comes back soon. It's not a serious ankle injury, and we see a little more of that. That also leads me to the Thunder's defense as a whole. Thunder held the Hawks to only 38% shooting on the night from the floor. Obviously, something I haven't mentioned is the Hawks didn't play a lot of their players either. Trae Young was out. He is not hurt. Jalen Johnson was not playing. There were some other players that weren't playing as well, but still held the Hawks bench basically to 38% on the night. Hawks only had 5 free throws to Thunder's 25. I believe they had 0 free throws in the first half. And the Thunder had, I'm trying to remember how many they had, but regardless, 25 free throws for the Thunder to only 5 for the Hawks. They're defending like they are with all this aggression. They forced 17 turnovers, had 28 points off those turnovers. They're playing extremely aggressive, and they're not fouling, and that is huge. I understand that Trae Young, some of these other players weren't playing. So we're not going to see that big of a discrepancy in free throw attempts probably throughout the regular season. But my point is these guys play incredible defense, and they do so very diligently. They aren't going out and getting fouls, and being able to do that and get those steals and that not resulting in more fouls. I mean, that is how you get the best defense in the league. And that's something to really monitor, something we've seen a lot of during this preseason. I can't wait to see more of it. Guess kind of transitioning into some individual players who stood out. I'm seeing some comments in the chat. Just like you all, I am very torn on Usman Dieng. And I think no better game than tonight to show why we all are so torn on Usman. Also, tweeting from my personal account a couple nights ago, a lot of people, or not a lot, there were a couple Thunder fans upset saying that we always talk about Us's negatives and never talk about when he plays well. And I kind of pushed back and said, okay, yes, but we saw a lot of the same issues when he played well against the New Zealand Breakers with basically the OKC Blue. He maybe had a good stat line. That was more so based off just opportunity, not so much aggressiveness and some things we wanted to see from Us. But I thought we saw a lot of pauses from Us in the second half. First half wasn't great. I think the perfect example of that, and this might have actually been the third quarter to start the third, but Usman starts alongside Dillon Jones. Usman drives just basically recklessly into the lane. He gets like 2 defenders on him. He doesn't know what to do. He is in midair trying to find a teammate to pass the ball to. It didn't lead to a turnover, but like as we've seen with this Thunder team in the past, those usually do. Next offensive possession, Dillon Jones, true rookie, comes in, drives to the rim, finds a cutting. I think it was Isaiah Joe, maybe it was Wiggins. Just a beautiful play. That's what we want to see more of from Us. And so that was kind of his first half. He was playing with some of the starters, had opportunity, but just wasn't doing a lot with it. The second half, though, he played much better. We saw, I think, in that third quarter, after he kind of struggled to start, Us had an and one where he drove to the rim, absorbed contact, and was able to finish over a defender, which is something very similar to what we saw with him in the G League with the Blue last season. Then he had 2 3-pointers as well. So in the third quarter, we'll get into Isaiah Joe, who was just torching OKC. I think he had 14 of the Thunder's 28 third quarter points, but Usman had 9 of those. And I thought he looked much more aggressive. And as a game, as he settled in the second half, again, the competition went down. I have to mention that. The Hawks were playing more of their end of the bench guys, but I thought Us looked much more comfortable, especially with his playmaking, driving to the rim, moving some off ball. And that was really positive. And so the reason I want to bring up Us is because, like I mentioned, with the heart injury, and just in general, even before that, I was saying that I think, the Thunder are going to give Us every opportunity to try and prove himself and improve early in the season before sending him back probably to the Blue to get some more of those reps. And then maybe we don't see a whole lot of Us the rest of the season. We probably see even more Us now than I was anticipating with the heart injury. And especially with some of the lineups that Daigneault's thrown out the past couple preseason games, I would not be shocked to see a little more Usman Dieng. So hopefully he can build off that promising second half is what I'm getting at. I mentioned Isaiah Joe. And also Jacob Niffensayer mentions Us always looks good when it comes to G League level players. And that's correct. I will say, though, he wasn't playing against all G League level players there in the third quarter where he looked more promising. But that there is something to be said there as well. Moving on to Isaiah Joe, like I mentioned, especially in the third quarter, he just caught fire. And when Isaiah Joe catches fire, it's one of the most fun players on this team to watch. He had 14 of the Thunder's 28 points. He was hitting threes from all over the court. He actually had one that he missed, which was even more impressive to me because he had hit 2 straight, comes back down, does like some draw. He starts to drive, goes between the legs, has a step back. It was just absolutely filthy. And I thought he was going to drain that one. He didn't. But his playmaking, he was moving off ball and cutting, just doing all the great things that we love from Isaiah Joe. And I thought he had a fantastic game, defending well on the other end of the floor. I think he took a charge or at least drew an offensive foul. Just really great stuff from Isaiah Joe. And especially if J Dub's going to be out for the first part of the season, we're going to be seeing a lot more of Isaiah Joe. And obviously he has shown that he can live up to the occasion. But Isaiah Joe is a hot and cold player. We've seen him. He still plays the same way, which I love about him. He's still doing the right things on both sides of the floor, even when he's not making those 3-point attempts. But that is what obviously makes Isaiah Joe so dangerous and adds so much to this offense. So I'm really hoping tonight was just a precursor for the first part of the season, and he's able to stay hot and continue to hit those outside shots, especially when he's playing more with guys like Shai and Caruso and Kaysen. If Dub's not playing, that can create and lead to open outside opportunities for Isaiah Joe. Now it's time to get into 2 of my favorite players on this team already. The rookies. They look awesome, and they looked awesome yet again. Dillon Jones. We'll get into his stat line. We'll get into some of these things I have for him, but maybe my favorite thing about Dillon Jones is how much Mark already recognizes that he's just like a workhorse. I think it was that New Zealand Breakers game. He barely set the entire game. And tonight in the second half, he barely set as well. I think he played almost the entire third quarter. And like I said, played basically the entire second half and doesn't look like he's ever gassed. always playing the same exact way, 110% on both ends of the floor. I think about this play on the defensive side of the ball. I believe it was in the third quarter. He is defending, I think it was somebody coming up and setting a pick for somebody at the top of the key. And they switch, or sorry, the Thunder do not switch. The pick didn't work. Pick and roll didn't work. Dillon Jones drops back to the free throw line. And I think the Hawks swing the ball over to the right wing and immediately swing it back over to somebody at the top of the key who had a wide open three-point attempt. Dillon Jones comes out of nowhere, blocks a shot at the top of the key. I tweeted this out from the uncontested account. I think it was the Thunder who tweeted it out originally. Just an incredible play, being able to respond and be able to get out there and contest that shot. Like, that's everything you love about Dillon Jones. Then it was like 2 possessions later, he comes down and takes a charge. And that's just what he does. I mentioned his playmaking, driving to the rim, being able to find players off ball, and just his high basketball IQ obviously fits this Thunder team to a T. And then tonight, really quickly, just going through his stat line, he had 10 points. He had 6 points, 10 rebounds, which is huge. That's something this Thunder team obviously really struggled with last year. So guys like Dillon Jones and having 10, Cason Wallace having 6, especially without Josh Giddey now on the floor and Ihart being hurt, I thought Dillon's rebounding was incredibly impressive, as well as his playmaking. I mentioned the 5 assists, only 2 of 9 from the floor. Both of those were threes. But he's just a workhorse. I love him. I love his aggressiveness. Speaking of his playmaking, I found this stat really interesting. Nick Gallo tweeted it out. I want to give him credit, but then I adjusted it because he tweeted it out with like a quarter to play. So with just over a little, with over a little of 100 preseason minutes now that Dillon Jones has played in the preseason, he has 18 assists. That's incredibly impressive, especially for somebody his size. And also, side note, we're calling him DJ. A lot of his teammates call him DJ. Seeing a lot of tweets about DJ and AJ. I mean, it's perfect. But every time I hear DJ, I think about Go DJ by Lil Wayne. That was like one of my favorite songs growing up. Obviously, very famous song. If the Thunder, and we've seen the Thunder do fun things when players check in. Like Danilo Gallinari had that fan-made song about him, and the Thunder would play that every time he checked in or shot a free throw. If the Thunder do not play at least the instrumental of Go DJ every time Dillon Jones checks in, I don't know what we're doing. I need the Go DJ instrumental, or just the Go DJ. That's my DJ every time he checks in or shoots a free throw. I think it'll be perfect. So again, a lot to be excited about with Dillon Jones. Leads me to the next rookie on this team. AJ Mitchell just continues to impress. He got some early burn yet again with the starters and some of the main rotation bench players there in the first quarter, but then we didn't really see him a lot until the end of or maybe midway through the third into the fourth quarter. And he's been doing what he's done all preseason. Basically took the game over. Wasn't scoring like necessarily a ton, but he had 10 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, got up 10 shots, 4-10 from the floor in 19 minutes. The most impressive thing about AJ is his ability to get to the rim. Not something I noticed, I guess, whenever the Thunder selected him. I was kind of diving into some film and watching his college highlights, but he's improved at that at such a high level. His body control, being able to create separation in the paint whenever he gets to the rim, to be able to get his shot off. And every time he does, it's going in. The fluidity. I mean, it's incredibly impressive. Combine that with the ball handling, his ability to create separation with defenders that allows him to be able to drive to the rim. And there's so much to be excited about with AJ Mitchell. For him, playmaking probably needs to improve a little more, but he's a solid playmaker. Obviously, another player who reads the floor at a high level. The defense, he's a good defender, or he's a decent defender. I'm not sure he's good yet. And then the three-point shot. But ultimately, if you have a player who can come off the bench like AJ Mitchell, who can create his own shot and get to the rim at will and create for teammates in that way for wide open three-point attempts, and then he's also able to play off ball with some of these guys like a Shai, Dub, whoever it may be, and can hit some catch and shoot three-point shots. I mean, we're talking about an absolute steal that Sam Presti found. Yet again, very common theme here over the past couple of years with Sam Presti and draft prospects. So nothing but more praise for AJ Mitchell. We've talked about basically all preseason. And I keep going back to the very beginning of training camp when I think it was J Dub and Mark both had high praise for AJ. Kind of took us off guard, especially with Mark. He's not one to necessarily go out of his way to like single out a player or anything like that. He did with AJ. We're seeing why. This guy's already NBA ready, and that's really exciting. Finally, before we get into our Prairie L's player of the game, just quickly, I'll mention Caruso, Kaysen, and Wiggins. I thought they all just did their thing, right? They were solid. None of them had big stats that really popped other than the 6 rebounds I mentioned with Kaysen Wallace, which was great to see. Caruso, just an incredible defender, super aggressive on point of attack and on the perimeter. And then Wiggins just doing his normal things. He also had 6 rebounds. That pops as well. Only 1 of 5 from the floor tonight, but continues to move off ball so well. Nothing major to talk about with those 3 players other than they're just extremely foundationally sound and just incredible players who fit this team to a T. So that leads me now to, let me go into our overlays here. For those of you watching the live stream, pull up the King of the Prairie player of the game, brought to you by our proud sponsor and partners over at Prairie L's. My player of the game for tonight, it's a player I already talked about. I'm going with Isaiah Joe. 16 points, like I mentioned, most of those in the third quarter. 4 rebounds, 6 of 10 from the floor, 50%, 4 of 8 from 3. He just, when Isaiah Joe's playing at this level, like I said, hard to find. I mean, an extremely fun player. It's extremely fun when he's on, like he was tonight. And I just thought he played a solid all-around game on both ends of the floor, especially in the third quarter when the main starters were sitting and with Dub out due to injury. This is a player, if Dub is out an extended period or even just a week or so, that's going to have a bigger opportunity. And I really hope that that 3-point shooting continues into the regular season. George. Yeah. So just a little inside baseball. I'll go ahead and take off the King of the Prairie overlay. George says, kind of proud of Taylor. I don't think he has even taken a drink of water or taken a breath tonight. And that is the epitome of solo post games. Obviously, we're always going to do our best with 5 of us trying to get at least one other person on post games throughout the season because it makes for better content and it's a lot more fun for all of us. But it's a long game. A long season. And it's a long season for the Uncontested as well. There are going to be some solo podcasts and not a lot of drinks that can be taken during the podcast and not a lot of breaths either. So I think that's pretty much all I have. I think we covered this game, covered the iHeart injury, covered the J Dub injury. Obviously a little disappointing, not the high we wanted to ride into that we had during this preseason heading into the regular season next week due to those injuries. But at the same time, this team's extremely deep, extremely fun. They can weather the storm with these injuries this season. And we're just going to hope that this is it for a while, that we get iHeart back, hopefully end of November, early December, and he's 100%. We get J Dub back, hopefully after only a week or so. And we're going to have a really fun season ahead. So really quick, before we get out of here, there's a lot of comments, but I'll try and pick a couple that stand out. Apologies if I don't get to all of them. David Skelton mentions Oos, saying that he played pretty well. A lot of you guys bringing up, and that's something else we love, the community that you all have created within the chat. Some of the inside jokes you guys are bringing up from the last couple of podcasts. Really great stuff. Kieran said, Taylor never answered the Black Lotus or Soul Ring question. And Kieran, that is because I still don't really know what either of those are. So that is why myself and Nick did not answer those. George is saying Soul Ring is always the answer. So you know what? Cream cheese in the chat from George. I got to side with my guy. Let's go with Soul Ring, even though I don't know what that is. David mentioned Dub joking around on Twitter just now. So hopefully that means he's okay. I mentioned food earlier yet again. So Smoot says the Uncontested podcast is my favorite food podcast that occasionally talks Thunder basketball. Yeah, we've been all over the map in the off season. Pretty fun. Let's see. Anything else? Smoot said, didn't J Will also have a hamstring issue last preseason? I think maybe he did, or at least it was early in the season. That's a good point. Hopefully it's nothing to be concerned about long-term with him. I mean, we obviously saw him play a lot of the games during the regular season last year. So I don't think that's the case. But really hoping it's kind of a low-key thing to keep an eye on over this next week. Another week for J Will to get healthy, and hopefully he's ready to go. What else? A lot of good comments in here, but I'm trying to find some questions. I'm just going to go ahead and scroll down to the end. George said I didn't say anything about Dukas, Jacob's dump truck Dukas. Yeah, Dukas got some minutes there at the end of the game. I think it's pretty apparent that he's above the pecking order with some of the other blue guys during the preseason. Maybe we see a little bit of him here or there, throughout the regular season if games are, out of hand. Dukas shows some promising things. He has size. He can defend a bit. Obviously, he can shoot. He's an interesting prospect, but we probably don't see a ton of him with the Thunder. I'm more so really interested in seeing what he looks like with the blue because I think he'll get a lot of burn there. Shout out Jacob Niffin's hair for saying this might be his favorite podcast of all time. Shout out all of you guys in the chat and gals in the chat. It's been awesome, just especially throughout the off season. It keeps us going. We have a ton of fun. And like I said, another hint, we have more opportunities for you all to engage with us that we will be announcing here within the next week, heading into the regular season that we think you all will really enjoy and we'll really kind of take this podcast to the next level. So thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you for listening to me rant about injuries and the Thunder's preseason. Cannot wait to be talking about real regular season Thunder basketball here a week from today. We'll be back Sunday night for our Bets podcast, and we'll be live, like I mentioned, from the Paycom Center Monday. Myself, Silva, and Jacob Niffin. And don't forget about the watch party on Saturday out at the Prairie L's tap room. We're really excited about that. Can't wait to see you all in person and get to meet you all. Thanks again for tuning in. We're almost there. 1 week. As always, Thunder up.